am I going to be, what to say, better off? Am I going to spend in the longer run lesser amount of money than I would have spent? Can I get back to my normal routine activity? So everybody in this whole group is looking for different kind of needs, and that's what many times today your research and your data has to cater to. Next slide. So this, what happens is that the physician becomes aware because of the data, because the policymakers, they have adoption that they start using the methodology, and the patient for it is affordability. So this data that we should be getting at should address awareness, adoption is used, and affordability. So that's how when you're looking at any data related to a healthcare kind of a product or a project, should be looking at. Now what exactly, I will not go into these detailed steps, but what does evidence-based medicine, it's asking a question. Acquiring the knowledge about it. Appraising is basically looking at it, whether that evidence that has been generated, how authentic it is, how good it is. Is that evidence that has been generated is scientifically valid? Does it undergo all the statistical tests which is there? Applying it, using it in your day-to-day knowledge, and finally assessing it, the effectiveness of that evidence. So that's how evidence is looked at. Next slide. Next. So the EBM process, as I said, just go through the slides. Yeah, that's it. So a question is asked, evidence is looked at, it is evaluated, it is applied and improved. So if you see, how do you do research? Is that you go to basically research that has been done earlier by different other researchers. If you want to develop a new kind of entity, it may be a new innovation. What is the point in developing a new or a same car? I'll give you an example of car, and one of the examples that is being talked of today in a big way is the cars and the mobiles. Apple is being talked of because of innovating the entire kind of communication setup. And when Samsung came in with these other products, they came in with some innovation. So what they did was that they studied the market. They asked questions, what exactly the consumer wants, what exactly is wanted by people around. Then they went into the research project, and then they came out with a superior product. One of the examples that we give these days is the car which has come in the market, which is a Maruti Ertiga. Now that's a car which is basically a kind of a size of a sedan. It basically has got space which can accommodate 7 to 8 people. So that's where they studied the car market. So you have to study what is existing in the market. What is the unmet need? So that's what all evidence is about. I'm not talking about something which is highly technical. If as future researchers, you do not understand what is the need, if you do not have the insights into the current knowledge and what is the gap in that knowledge, you will not be able to innovate and come with newer examples. So that's where you should look at it. So, and then finally you find that this is a gap or this is an existing product. How do you improve on the product? What are the ways and means of improving on the product? What is the technology that I can use to improve the product? That's how it is all, you'll have to think about it. So that's what is about evidence-based process. Next slide. So question you asked is that, is my practice or is the product evidence-based? Am I giving the best and the right treatment to my patients? Am I caring for the patient values while looking at the treatment modalities? Have I applied valid and relevant? So these are some questions that doctors should ask themselves. Next. Again, these are what to say, some kind of criteria. I won't go into the details. Next. Again, these are some questions. How do I get an access to clinical research publication? Now, this is one thing that you have to look at it, is that how do you do literature search? So that is also an important aspect when you are doing research. What is the literature available? Who has done research? What kind of research has been done? So getting access to that research is important. How do I describe the quality of journals? You are accessing and looking at several journals. How do you know which journal is good, what is bad, what is a good publication, what is a good research? So these are the questions also you have to look at it. How do I get the relevant publication? Where do I access this data? Today we were talking in the morning that a lot of data is available with us. However, we don't know where it is, who has it, and how do we get it. And finally, once we have it, how do we use it for our own research purposes. So that's all about evidence-based process. Next. Again, you look at what to say. Step 2 is acquiring the best journal. So the source, looking at opinion, papers, editorials, case studies, case reports, clinical examination, diagnostics, laboratory testings, animal experiments, human experiments or clinical trials. So these are different kind of healthcare related research articles that come into the picture. Next slide. Again, how do I read the publication? How do I critically evaluate and appraise? So the question is that how do I judge for myself that this is the best literature that I am looking at? Next. This is the entire kind of process which is there, flow chart of a RCT. The best study that is supposed to be conducted in a clinical form is something called as a RCT, randomized controlled trial. I will not go into the details, but these are the terminologies. Next. Again, you ask is that is the trial conducted related to my clinical practice? Is it relevant to me? Is the data relevant to me? So that's what has to be looked at it. How to use the results and methodology in my practice, in my patients or in my setting where I am doing my research. Do I have an expertise using this new methodology? So if I do not have the expertise, then I need to go and train myself. So where do I get trained myself? What would be the patient's preferences and perspectives here? Next slide. So these are several steps in terms of expertise, training, affordability, kind of clinical data. Next. Again, you look at it at, am I keeping what to say, a watch on the data that is there, whatever new I am practicing, is that the gold standard? Because everybody says is that give me the best treatment. So is it the best that I am using? Is there a change in regulatory guideline? Now this is an important aspect. This is an important aspect not only for a clinician who is treating the patients, but also for people like you, me, who are undertaking research. If you develop a product, as I said at the outset, it's a healthcare product. It is governed by a lot of regulations. There is something in this country called as Drugs and Cosmetic Act, which is by a legislation of Parliament in 1942, and several amendments have to have it. So how do you really look at the regulations? What kind of regulations do you want to follow? If you finally want to have that as a standard of thing, is it a part of guidelines? So several questions are coming up. Next. 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 These are level of references, which is the best reference. So as I said, RCT is the best reference, and there are certain references which are like experiences, expert reports, some kind of case reports. So there's a variety of references which is there. Next. And again, strength of the reference depends on how exactly it is, whether it is level 1, level 2. So these are the technical things. Next. The benefits of using evidence-based in your practice, in your research, is that you co-create specialties and market. That means what happens is that when you are working in your area, you are not only able to work in your area, but you are also collaborate with other people. So that's where the evidence helps you to collaborate. You may collaborate with the pharmacology, with the toxicology department, with different departments. So collaborative research. Then what is there is that ensures adoption. That evidence will allow your idea to be used for a wider spectrum of people. And then the next is that what to say in subsequent challenges, overcome subsequent challenges, competitive differentiation and esteem and pride. What is competitive differentiation? If your colleague or somebody who is in competition with you has got one product, however you have innovated and made a better product, that gives you competitive edge. And it also gives you very happy to see your name in publications, presenting at conferences. So that's the esteem and pride as a professional that you get. Next slide. Next slide. So this is what I wanted to share with you, is that why do you need to look at all these things? Because tomorrow, most of you, and even who will go to the industry and even who stay in academics, will have to generate a lot of ideas, innovations, so that you can cater to the changing needs of the environment. Now, just to give an example, and that's what I was sharing with your faculty in the morning, is that today if you go to an industry and you say that you want funding for a particular project, some of the critical questions that are going to be asked to you, and that is based on these kind of evidences, is that how are you different from whatever is there in the market? How long it will take for you to develop the final idea? How effective that idea is going to be commercialized? So what is the time frame? And one of the questions that is going to be asked, which is very critical for all of us when we work in our commercial organizations, is that what is the investment that is needed to develop this idea and what is the return on investment? So these are few critical questions, and only when you have this kind of evidence and insights in different areas you can really address those things. So that is what a very small experience that I wanted to share with you. The idea that I wanted to give with you is that you have to look at it as a kind of a wider spectrum when you are looking at your profession or your specialty. How do you really look at it? Because when you talk of biomedical engineering, you are looking at healthcare systems, you are looking at healthcare practices, and how exactly you make yourself very efficient in healthcare practices. So that's what a little experience that I wanted to give, and I think probably we have some time for questions.
Now we will have a small question and answer session. You can clear your valuable doubts.
Good evening, sir. So what I want to ask is that is there a need for creating a centralized database for all this research in India, because a lot of places it's not available to most of the doctors. Is there a need for a centralized database?
Yes. Now, one of the major issues that we see in clinical practice is that we actually see, when you look at centralized database and when you look at research and when you look at evidence, there are two types of evidences which are there. Number one is the evidence that has been generated, say, in US, evidence that has been generated in Europe, or maybe in the rest of the world. The second part of evidence and the second part of research is there is a research being undertaken in the country. Because as a physician, as a person who you are looking at development, you have to look at something what is current and what exactly is important. A field of cancers or oncology. The commonest cancer in US is breast cancer, and therefore you see a lot of research happening on breast cancer. However, in India, head and neck cancers and lung cancers and cervical cancers in women are some of the commonest cancers. So therefore, the data has to be relevant, the data has to be to the local situation, and that is what is currently lacking. If you look at what happens overall in terms of the global data, there are several databases like Medline, PubMed, and different other sources and journals which are there which will give you access to that data. However, what we are lacking today, and that is what the point that I want to emphasize, is that we do not have local data. In fact, if you look at from the patient population point of view, we have 1.2 billion patients or people, out of which we have the maximum incidences of certain diseases like diabetes or any other diseases. However, we lack the epidemiological data, we lack the treatment data, and that's where my emphasis is on to create your own data. And when you look at such large institutions where we are standing, they have a large patient pool, and if that data is collected, that kind of data is analyzed, it gives a lot of information based on what are the local needs. One of the terminologies that we use currently is market appropriate product. Now, again, to give an example of car, because we keep on seeing those every day and the mobiles every day. One of the small innovations which one of the mobiles made years ago, and that was for the rural markets, is that they came up with a torch in that. Why? Because the electricity situation is not very good there. So that's one of the situations. So what exactly is important? So you need to come with innovations and the data related to that innovations which is relevant to your scenario, and that's what is most important.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, sir. So if we just glance through the current scenario of biomedical industry,
So can you just tell me that what kind of situation or marketing situation is now going on in biomedical industry, and after 4 years, what are the placement chances for biomedical engineers?
Okay. Probably 1, 2 or 3 years ago, the organization that I work for, that is Johnson & Johnson Medical Division, was one of the only organizations which was there in the market, in sutures, in different kinds of innovations. And we had probably, even today we have 70 to 60% of market